Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. So it is Valentine's Day, and as always, love is in the air, along with candy, flowers, greeting cards, all that jazz. And as usual, I have been going through my list of must-be watched Hallmark Happily Ever After films and things like that. But, as much as I love the traditional rom-com, this season I was kind of feeling a little bit differently about everything. And I have two recommendations for you guys today that are definitely romances that are a bit off the beaten path. They're still excellent. They are still love stories, but there's a lot more to them than your standard happily ever after crafted story. So as always, these recommendations are available to you entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. So without any further ado, let's get to those recs. Okay, the first of my two recs today is available to you via our Canopy service, and that is 2014's Only Lovers Left Alive. So if you're anything like me and you recently watched Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, you might be in a bit of a vampire frame of mind, which I definitely am. And it feels like vampire stories are fresher than ever. People are always looking to retell these sort of old tales in a new way. And while it's already 10 years old, I definitely feel like Jim Jarmusch's Only Lovers Left Alive has this really interesting take on the vampire love story. We are introduced to Adam and Eve, two vampires who've been lovers for centuries. At some point, they ended up living separately. One is in the States and the other is in Tangiers. They have been around the block, man. They have seen civilizations rise and fall. They've seen different places come into power. And it's really interesting to see how essentially these two predators have sort of risen above a lot of these instincts. At least that's how it seems throughout the vast majority of this film. They see the beauty in artistry and poetry and music, and a lot of the movie is them sort of trying to figure out how humanity can be blind to so much of its own beauty. And it's definitely, it's not a dark movie. I that's what I think is really, really interesting about it. It's definitely got some dark themes, but you do still have this obsession with creativity and creation. And I really, really loved that about it. And you also just have this really kind of sort of gothic romance between Adam and Eve. Adam, who's played by Tom Hiddleston, and Eve, who's played by Tilda Swinton, who are, of course, phenomenal actors. I will watch them in pretty much anything they're in. And their chemistry together is wicked solid. I mean, they are just amazing anytime they're in a scene together or anytime they're in scenes with other people in this movie. Maya Wasikowska plays Eve's sister, Ava, who ends up sort of upending their lives, and it's just very interesting to see how the Adam and Eve characters are so different from this other marginally younger vampire, but who views the world clearly very differently than they do. I do think that if this movie had been directed by anybody else other than Jim Jarmusch, it could have been just like a hot mess. But I sort of love his sort of very sort of like alternative take on situations. That's why I really enjoy how he's sort of played around with this vampire love story. He's if you're not familiar with his work, he's done like Ghost Dog. He did Broken Flowers with Bill Murray years ago. And all of his films just sort of quietly move you in a way. There's not, they're not big bombastic movies. He's very minimalist. He does a lot of playing around with the idiosyncrasies of life, and his movies are small in a lot of ways. They definitely still, even though he's a huge director, they definitely still have that sort of indie arty feel to them. And it's not like that faux artistry. You know, it's hard to explain, but there are a lot of directors who try to be indie artists, and it doesn't feel particularly authentic. They're not bringing anything new to the table. They're just sort of being derivative of these other artists. And Jarmusch's films have never felt that way to me. And Only Lovers Left Alive definitely still really like leans into that vibe that he just has. The score to this is really wonderful. There's a lot of trance music kind of going on, and I love that sort of lazy electric techno beat, and it leans into sort of a lot of the ethno beats that they put in, and it's just not something you would expect with this sort of gothic vampire romance, but it really works, especially with the way they've set up Adam and Eve in here. You also get a fantastic, very small, but like really resonant role from John Hurt, who is just, you know, one of those actors who is always super dependable and who just brings his A game to pretty much any role he plays. He plays Christopher Marlowe in this. I don't want to reveal any extras about that, but I definitely was vastly amused. But there's also, like, in addition to this sort of like artsy art house film vibe, you also get like just like these little nods of humor too. So like it feels like every vampire in this film, a requirement for them is to have like weird sort of shaggy bedhead no matter what time of day or what they're doing. Like it's filled with like, I think purposefully bad wigs. And it kind of like didn't hit me until maybe like 20 minutes into the movie, and I was like, wait, what? And it's really funny, and that's one of the other things. Like there's these little touches of humor, in addition to like these big, deep emotional explorations. And that's what I think is kind of fantastic about this. So if you're looking for a romance that sort of asks a lot of questions about what it means to be human and what beauty is, and how to bring art into the world, definitely check out Only Lovers Left Alive. Certainly not a Hallmark style happily ever after movie, but definitely one I think was worth watching, especially if you're looking for something just a little bit extra this season. Okay, so my other pick this week is the one that sort of got me started on this whole supernatural romance kick, and it's available via Hoopla, and that is The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live Season 1, which initially aired just last year, 2024. I will say, spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the original Walking Dead storyline, just so that I can set up what's going on in this spinoff. So if you haven't really watched The Walking Dead, one, you probably need to in order to understand why this spinoff series is so awesome. But two, I'm going to be talking a little bit about stuff that happens probably from the third season on, just briefly, but there will be spoilers. There's the alerts. Okay, so The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live is a spin-off of the original The Walking Dead series. It follows Rick and Michonne, and essentially the story of how they find one another. So in the original series, things happen within the course of the storyline that end up separating the two characters who are lovers when we last see them on the show. Rick is believed to be dead, and Michonne has this feeling, and she gets these little clues and hints that are quite vague and uncertain, but she just has this feeling that he's alive somewhere out there. And so she leaves the group that she's with and heads off into the wild to see if she can find him. And The Ones Who Live is where they do find one another and reconnect, and I am just so excited about this series. When they first announced it was actually going to happen, I was freaking out. One of my best friends is also a massive fan. We've been friends since college, and we live on opposite sides of the country, and so we immediately, though, like, we must have read the same headlines about the same time, because I get this text like maybe 30 seconds after I've started reading the article, and that's linking me to the same article. It's like, did you see this? And people who love Rick and Michonne as a ship have been waiting for this for years, and I've got to say, I'm very, very pleased that we finally got it. I'm really happy with how they developed each of their storylines. Would I watch another season of this? Absolutely, because I love these two characters, but I'm also happy, with what we have received. Again, I don't really want to talk too much about like the plot of The Ones Who Live, just because it was such a big deal for me. But if you like two incredibly independent and intelligent characters, super fiercely loyal, really connected to one another, and making sure the other stays alive, make sure that you check this out. It has crazy action, but it also just has really good acting, whether you're talking about Denai or Andrew, who play the two main characters, or any of the supporting cast. The supporting cast in this was really, really rock solid. Sometimes when you have big ensemble shows, you will end up finding like some actors who are maybe not up to the same level as your leads, but this was not the case at all. I really thought everyone, the villains and then their supporting characters, all really put in like the work. There's a lot of political sort of intrigue going on here, so if you happen to like those like backroom machinations, this is definitely one that has a lot of that. But like I mentioned, there's a ton of action too, so if you loved those big scenes in The Walking Dead, there's still definitely some of that. But I think honestly, at the heart of it, it's Rick and Michonne trying to figure out who they are when they find one another again, and who they want to be together. Like they're not the same, like how do you navigate that difference? Because they've both been through a lot since they've last seen one another. And there's some things that they kind of have to navigate in order to move forward. And I think they do a really, really solid job of this. Again, the chemistry is just so rock solid between the two of them. So if you are, and of course you're still dealing with zombies, it is a zombie apocalypse. So, in addition to the evils that humanity brings upon itself and one another, you do have, the occasional zombie hanging out, doing its thing, always just lurking. Though I would say through all of the original series and all of the spin-offs, the zombies, while like a great sort of baseline villain, are never the ones that you have to be as terrified of. Yes, of course, they spread the zombie plague and all of these things, and they eat people, and they're very clearly like monsters, but they have this one drive and that's it. There's not all of the extra like intrigue going on. Like I said, the people have always been the most terrifying villains in this whole franchise, whether you're talking about your anti-heroes, your characters that shift along the way, or you're just talking about like the black-hearted, dark, awful beings. It's always the humans that you have to be terrified of, and I think this one does a really excellent job of explaining why that is and how far some people are willing to go for power, for control. And I think this one was an excellent series, and one that I would love to see more of, but I'm happy with where we ended. So again, if you're interested in Rick and Michonne getting back together, make sure you check this out. If you're just following along with Walking Dead franchise titles, again, a really stellar addition to the franchise. If you like those sort of political machinations, if you just like zombie movies, The Ones Who Live, definitely worth your checkouts for the month. Season 1, totally available for free on Hoopla. It's must watch. All right, so those were my two supernatural tinged off the beaten path romance picks for this Valentine's Day. If you are more of a Hallmark Hall of Fame, Happily Ever After fan, there are tons of those recommendations out there, and there are tons of films available for you via your library card. So don't feel like you have to go a little bit dark. You absolutely don't. But yeah, if you happen to have any recommendations that are also supernatural tinged romances, please pop those in the comments below. Or if you have any recommendations for topics you would like us to cover in the near future, definitely always looking for themes. As always, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you next time. Bye bye.